Good afternoon to you, Sherwin. So, of course, we know that the voting stations opened a short while ago. You were in Manhattan not too long ago. Just give us a scene set in terms of where you are, Sherwin, and what you're hearing.
So I'm on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, so kind of central New York City, New York State, a bastion, a traditional democratic stronghold in terms of the various states in the United States. You know, Unati, New York is not one of those swing states that we tend to focus on at the latter stages of an election campaign in the United States. Solidly blue, expected to go into Kamala Harris's column come the end of voting here. But I will tell you, we've spoken to a number of voters after they cast their ballots at the voting station right behind me. And I will say that there has been an even split. We talked to about 8 or 9 people, and I would say there was an even split between people voting for Donald Trump in this election and people voting for Kamala Harris, which I will tell you anecdotally is unexpected given just how blue New York City tends to be. It could be indicative of something, but New York City in particular, very much a blue, expected to be a blue sort of bastion for the Democrats in terms of the outcome in this election. But that is not necessarily going to be emblematic across these United States, particularly in the swing states that have really been a central focus of our discussions over the last number of weeks. Your Wisconsins, your Michigans, your Pennsylvanias. The first indication, though, Unati, is that we're going to get later when polls close at around 7 p.m., some of the earliest polls tonight, local time, is to look at what happens in places like Georgia, look at what happens in places like North Carolina, one of the 2 early swing states that will begin to give us an idea of where we might be heading as the results come through in the different time zones. Your Wisconsins will be later, your Michigans will be later, but Georgia and North Carolina could be indicative of how this election is going to pan out come the end of tabulation when polls close later today.
You know, Sherwin, I mean, we've seen so many elections this year across the globe, just close to home recently, Mozambique and Botswana. A lot of these elections have brought along some change. In fact, even South Africa here with the government of national unity. As the Americans go to the polls today, what is front and center in their minds as they, of course, glean on what's happening globally, but also worry about what is to come for them domestically?
Yeah, and I think sort of infused in that question is whether you would expect a sort of big rupture, as you might have seen in places like Botswana, right, in this election. And I would argue that 2016 was that rupture. Donald Trump was the surprise factor in 2016. The pundits had Hillary Clinton winning that election, and Donald Trump, certainly in the political world back in 2016, was an unknown entity. He was seen as a very successful businessman that could bring that sort of acumen to bear in terms of the White House. But now Donald Trump is more of a political figure than he was, say, 12 years ago. And so people have a better understanding about his levels of competence, his levels of governance, and just how he would present the most powerful country in the world. You have this new factor in Kamala Harris, right? Not so new because she was the vice president to Biden for the last 3.5 years. But very much thrust into the forefront here, given Biden's surprise resignation in July this year. So over the last 4 months, she has really coalesced his supporters around him, the delegates needed to win the nomination, and she is the one that is pushing forward a message of a new generation of leadership. She believes the United States should turn the page here. Donald Trump is 78, will be 80 plus were he to win this election, and so she represents a new generation of leadership, and that has been a central message in this campaign. There are so many issues driving Americans to the polls, and we have certainly got some anecdotal evidence in our conversations with voters today. The economy is a central issue. Immigration is a central issue. We even talked to an Israeli voter, a woman with a family in Israel who believes that supporting Israel is a key question in this election. And so you have foreign policy persuading people and pushing them to the polls, but the economy is a central issue. Reproductive rights is a central issue. The question, Unati, is where will the numbers fall? Are we going to see big turnout from women? Does that portend well for a Kamala Harris? Or are we going to see a surge in mail voting? Does that favor Donald Trump in this election? The numbers are what matters here, and those will only be revealed sometime later today and into the week and days ahead.
And just speaking about numbers, Sherwin, of course, we know in the U.S. elections, the popular vote does not necessarily mean you will be an outright winner. Therein brings in the key states and why the emphasis on, the 7 battleground states that we continue to talk about, and also that element of the Electoral College. Just for the benefit of our viewers, I want us to just talk about these key states and how important it is to concentrate and kind of like look at what these numbers will start showing us, once these elections are over.
I'll tell you this, the Electoral College is a very unpopular system in the United States, particularly to Democrats that have won the popular vote in the majority of elections, but sometimes lose the White House. 2 big examples in 2000, when Al Gore won the popular vote, but George Bush won the election. Similarly to Hillary Clinton in 2016, winning the popular vote by 3 million votes. 3 million votes. That's a small city, right? And Donald Trump won the election because he won the Electoral College. And so the Electoral College is a representation of all the members of the House of Representatives and all the Senate. So there are 538 Electoral College votes. You want to win 270. 270 is the threshold that both candidate desires here. And that's why the swing states become so important. I was using the example of New York State as a Democratic bastion. You can bank those Electoral College votes for a Kamala Harris in this election. Similarly, a Donald Trump can bank a Alabama Electoral College vote because Alabama is going to vote, and Mississippi and Florida is going to vote for the Republican nominee. But that only gets you to so many Electoral College votes. That's why you need the swing states. You need to win Pennsylvania, you need to win Wisconsin, you need to win Michigan to buttress your numbers, to elevate your numbers beyond the 270 so that you can then get the keys to the White House. So the game here today is very much at the swing states. And as I mentioned to you earlier, the earliest indication about how the swing states are going to shape up is when you see Georgia close tonight, when you see the North Carolina close tonight. These are on the eastern side of the United States, so they're in the earliest time zone. So they'll close early, and they will give us the first indication. They will give us the first indication about where this election is heading. Will Kamala Harris, for the first time since 2008, be able to turn North Carolina blue? We saw Joe Biden turn Georgia blue. In the last election, will Kamala Harris be able to repeat that in this election? The polling there shows us within the margin of error, Kamala Harris may be leading by 1, Donald Trump may be leading by 1. Where does the margin of error in those races land? And does it favor one candidate or the other? And what does that then tell us about the other swing states that will come a bit later in the night? It's certainly going to be interesting to watch.
And one of the things that we are hearing is just how critical a moment this is when we start to look and reflect on how tight a race this is. But some are fearing that it does pose some form of risk, it being so tight, with fears, of course, that this will then call for an uproar or possible safety issues and concerns. What are analysts that you've been speaking to you fearful of, with this particular race?
Well, there's certainly across these United States, across the 50 states, a heightened state of readiness in terms of law enforcement, given the aspersions that have been cast about the integrity of this election. Similar to what we saw in 2020, it's emanating from one campaign, it's emanating from Donald Trump's campaign. He did that again last night when he gave his final rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And so there's a great deal of concern that if this were to be as tight a race as the polls suggest it will be, that counting will go late into the night, perhaps a few days after Election Day here. And what we saw in 2020, what does the most recent example teach us? Donald Trump declaring victory on the night before all the ballots were counted, before all the states had released their final outcome. You'll remember that they voted on a Tuesday 4 years ago, but the final result only came on Saturday morning, so multiple days later. So there's a great deal of concern about the rhetoric on election night. Will one campaign or both campaigns suggest that they have won this election before the final results are in? And if the final results are different to the narrative or claim emanating from those campaigns, what does it do to people that are kind of riled up or sitting on the edge of their seats watching this very closely? We saw violence on January 6, 2021. So the posture here is certainly a great deal of anxiety, a great deal of concern about how this might play out, and the responsibility that one must attach to what one says, given the power that a Donald Trump or a Kamala Harris would have in a situation like this. So certainly a great deal of concern about security in this election, particularly securing election precincts, the tabulation of the results, the election infrastructure. We've seen the National Guard called on to be on standby in places like Washington State and Nevada out of an abundance of caution. So certainly lots to watch in that respect. And look, let me just paint a picture for you here, Unati. I'm sure you want me to go soon, but there are three ways this election is going to go. Either it's going to be a landslide for Kamala Harris, or it's going to be a landslide for Donald Trump because of those margins of errors that we've seen in the polls, or it's going to be, as the polls have suggested, a very tight race. That means we're going to be poring over the data and the numbers way into the night, perhaps even in tomorrow and even Thursday. So there's three scenarios here. The question is, which one will we get? And the earliest indication of that will be the outcome of Georgia, the outcome of North Carolina, and then our forecasts will be a little bit more accurate in terms of what we know and where we go.